Why do you keep dating these avoidant guys? You know it's going to hurt you, right? A few months down the road, when he stops giving you attention, when he stops responding to text messages, you're having a conversation that you think is going fine, or you voice a concern, and then he goes from a boyfriend to a brick wall, and you're like, wait, what? And how do I get through this brick wall? And it feels impossible. I mean, it keeps happening and you know the pain of it, but somehow you keep getting back into these same relationships. Well, today I'm going to help give you some clarity around two things. One, why do you keep dating these avoidant guys? And number two, I'm going to help you know how to break this pattern so you no longer date the guy who feels more like a brick wall than a boyfriend, and you start finding guys who are DTC, down to commit, because that's what you're looking for. Okay, so specifically, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you might keep finding yourself in relationships with avoidant guys, and 3 ways of breaking those patterns, again, so you can find the man of your dreams right off into the sunset and actually have a loving, committed relationship. Number 1, the reason you keep attracting these avoidant partners is because parts of your subconscious, your attachment style, your trauma is taking over in your dating situations, and you're not even consciously aware of these patterns happening. So, for example, maybe you had a dad or a mom who showed some sort of dismissive qualities. They were hard to connect with emotionally. They never provided like gentleness, reassurance. They were uncomfortable with your emotions when you felt upset. And this left some wounding for you. It felt like nobody was really there for you in the way that you needed them. And what's tricky about our brains is that our brains are always trying to recreate the trauma that we once experienced in an attempt to heal it. I'm not much of a video gamer, but if I was, it's almost like trying that level over again. You know, you like get killed by the boss at the end of the level and you're like, oh man, I got to try again. Your brain is doing that same thing over and over again. And so your brain will naturally pick up on patterns, even really subtle subconscious patterns of guys who might look similar to your dismissive, avoidant father or your more busy and emotionally unavailable mother, all in an attempt to finally win the love, approval, and affection of either mom or dad. If you have an anxious attachment style in particular, the calm consistency that a avoidant partner shows in the beginning of a relationship, which is really their protective mechanism. They've learned to be highly independent and kind of stonewall the world around them. In the beginning, though, it looks like confidence. It looks like stability. And if an anxiously attached person can find somebody that they feel like they're getting stable, calm, safe attention from, oh man, that's going to feel so good, because the anxiously attached have this fear of abandonment. And so that calm and consistent presentation can be confused for safety, when in reality, it's the avoidant partner's protective mechanism of not getting too close to anybody. Also, if you have an anxious attachment style, if the guy who's more calm and a little bit more aloof or independent is giving you attention, you're going to feel extra chosen. It's going to soothe or kind of rock, almost like imagining your wound. It's going to like rock and nurture that wounded part of you that's afraid of not being chosen. You're being chosen by the guy who looks like he doesn't choose anybody. He's kind of aloof and doing his own thing. That's going to feel really good to kind of like your inner child or your attachment style or whatever you want to call it deep down in there. Okay, so we know reason number 1 is that there's subconscious patterns that are leading you into these relationships, but how do we break those patterns? So antidote number 1 is learning to be aware of the patterns and consciously start dating. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a framework to make this much more easy and possible. It's called TEST, green flag, red flag. And I don't want you to get confused here. You know, there's an unhealthy way of testing your partner by introducing overt like dysfunction, right? Like pretending to be upset when you're not really being upset, or picking a fight just to see how they'd respond to you. That's not the kind of testing that I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about testing the relationship and testing the partner in a way that's healthy. So I'll go through a few examples and you'll get the idea. If you're writing things down, I would write down these examples, because these are clear-cut things to look for, both red flags and green flags, and how to draw out those red flags and green flags when you're in a relationship. Test number 1, share something vulnerable with this person. I would say first date, probably not the best place to do it, but I mean, there's different degrees of vulnerability. Early in a relationship, you don't want to like pour all of your trauma onto somebody or tell them every vulnerable feeling you have about them. That could push them away, whether they're avoidant or not. But what I'm talking about is small little signals of vulnerability. Maybe telling them something that you're personally working on, something about your faith and how you feel about your connection with God, or a weakness that you're maybe a little bit insecure about at times, or something that feels just a little bit more emotional rather than just, hey, how many siblings do you have? You could talk about what's meaningful for you in your life that draws up, that passion around what's important to you. It can be a variety of things, but test number one is bring in some vulnerability of some sort. The green flag is if they go with you into the vulnerability pretty easily. They start sharing what's important to them, what maybe they're afraid of. Another green flag that you'd probably want to see with that is that they get a little bit more curious about you. They want to ask questions about the fear, the passion, the vulnerability that you just shared. They lean into it, leaning into you, and they lean into it by leaning into themselves and sharing with you what's going on for them as well. Red flag is if they just skip the conversation entirely. They kind of shrug it off, they change subjects, or they crack a joke to relieve any kind of emotional pressure. Test number two, you have to at some point ask them what they're looking for in dating and in relationships. I wouldn't ask them early on, like, so what's your intentions with you and I? Where do you see us going? Like, that's going to scare off an avoidant or somebody who's not even avoidant at all. But asking things like, so what are your goals for dating? Or what are you hoping for? Or what are you looking for? Do you want to be married one day? Or do you want a family? Green flag is that they have an easy, ready to go yes in their back pocket. Where they're like, yeah, of course. Like I'm dating to be married. I definitely want a family. I'm looking for a life partner. A red flag is if they flat out say, no, I'm not looking for that. I'm just having fun. A red flag is if they don't really have much of an answer. They're like, oh yeah, I don't know. They're kind of humming and hawing around the answer, but they don't really give you a clear one. And another red flag, it's not quite as stark red, but it's still a red flag, is if they put a bunch of qualifiers around the answer. Like, yeah, at the right time. And oh yeah, with the right person. Of course, at the right time with the right person. Of course. That's showing you that there's a lack of certainty around commitment that you might need to look out for. Test number three is just learn about their relationships. If they're not really close to anyone in their life, they don't have a deep, emotionally connected relationship to friends, family, or anybody at all, then that's a red flag. A green flag is they do have deeply connected emotional relationships with someone, whether it's a mom, brother, sister, friends, somebody from their church or from college. It doesn't really matter. We just want to see that they do have some sort of deeper emotional connection with somebody. These other red flags, they don't necessarily come with one specific test that you can control or not, but these are things to look out for. Another red flag is if they just are avoidant around emotional things in general. Let's say you're watching a movie and they start to kind of make fun of the sappy movie, or they leave the room, or they overtly say, oh man, this is too much, or like, this is lame. And they're disengaging from something that's a little bit more emotional. A red flag is if the time you spend together increases and you've spent time over a longer period of time, but commitment isn't increasing. Big red flag. If it seems like commitment and time were both increasing, and then all of a sudden they seem to drop off the planet out of nowhere, they're not responding as much, they don't seem as, available to you, that's probably meaning they're leaning a bit more avoidant and they're getting fearful because their trigger is coming up, which is commitment. A yellow flag that's not quite red and it's not quite green is if they've never had a serious relationship before. This is a little bit different depending on how old you are and they are. If you're really young and they're young and they've never had a relationship, okay, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. If they're quite a bit older and they've had a lot of dating opportunities, but it's never progressed to something serious, then that's definitely a red flag. Here's the caveat I have to give you around all these red flags and green flags. If you get so caught up in looking at these things as black and white, and you get so fearful that you're trying to avoid the avoidant, eventually you avoid relationships and commitment in general because you're so afraid that everybody's going to be an avoidant. Most of the time, you're really going to find out if somebody's an avoidant a couple months into a relationship, which I know is difficult. But here's the thing. If that's the price that you need to bear in order to find your person, going through 1 year of relationships that don't work out and trading that for a lifetime of partnership with somebody else, sounds like a good trade to me. So don't be so fearful of the avoidant that you're flat out becoming anxious and avoidant yourself. The second reason why you keep finding yourself in relationships with avoidant men is because you're quite literally addicted to them in the same way that you could be addicted to drugs or alcohol or anything in this world. And it's wild because the neurochemistry and the addiction cycle pattern follows the exact same pattern that you would find in those other addictions that I just mentioned, the drugs and the alcohol. Phase 1 of the I'm addicted to avoidant guys cycle is connection. This, and I'm making some assumptions, most likely if you're watching this, you probably have an anxious attachment style. And so in the beginning, when that avoidant guy gives you attention, phase 1 is connection. It feels amazing. It feels awesome. It's soothing your fears of abandonment, fears of not being chosen. You feel special and enough, especially if he's the guy who's a little bit aloof, like we already talked about. That's going to feel so good. So you're going to have things like dopamine and oxytocin flooding your brain in the very beginning. And it's going to feel like safety. But in phase 2, withdrawal, things start to get hard. Withdrawal is when that boyfriend turns into a brick wall, when the avoidant partner stops texting you back, something has changed in the cadence or the connection in the relationship. In that moment, you're going to start to feel fear, anxiety, and maybe even downright panic, especially if you have an anxious attachment style, because that distance is not going to just be kind of odd and curious to you like it might be to somebody who's securely attached. It's going to feel like straight up danger. And the neurochemistry of this all that feeds into the addiction cycle is that you're going to have things like stress hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline are going to spike through the roof. Your body is quite literally going to perceive that withdrawal as danger, and it's going to send you into fight or flight, which leads you into stage 3, which is the craving stage. In this stage, you've got low dopamine, which is driving this desire and this obsession to get back in connection with them. You're overthinking, you're checking your phone a lot, you're reading back through text messages and trying to solve the problem of what did I do wrong and where did this go sideways and how can I fix it? The next stage is the hit. This is when you get a hit of their attention. They reach out, they send you a text, they send you a meme, and all of the good feelings come back. Dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins just flood the system, and it feels amazing. And all of that is just a temporary chemical reward that reinforces a pattern where you start to see them as your source of safety, or your brain starts to perceive them and their attention as your source of safety. The inconsistency where they show up, they give you a little reward and tell you that they care about you or give you some attention and then withdraw and then come back. And it's intermittent and you can't track it. There's no good pattern to it. It kind of happens randomly. That actually reinforces the addiction cycle and makes it more addictive. That's why something like gambling is incredibly addictive, because you never really know when you're going to get your next hit, which leads us to the last phase, addiction. Your brain has learned to associate a pattern of pain, relief, reward, and they are always the source of the pain, the source of the relief, and the reward. And you're fully dependent on them. This is part of why you might stay in a relationship for way too long with an avoidant partner, even though consciously you know they're not good for you. Antidote number 2, how do you break this pattern? You simply have to be aware of it. You have to be able to separate your feelings from the facts. Sometimes even journaling this out, writing down, what are my feelings, the emotions? I feel a craving for them. I feel drawn to them. I feel like I want them back. But what are the facts? The facts are, if they haven't texted me in 2 weeks, they haven't responded to my last message, they keep blowing me off. I try to have a conversation about what I need in this relationship, and they always just make jokes and avoid it. Sometimes when you see both on paper, you start to have the clarity and the wisdom. You're turning on the conscious reasoning, thoughtful part of your brain, which will give you some power to make better choices. I would also add that one of the greatest antidotes to addiction is connection. Learn how to fill the unmet needs that they are feeling, needs such as attention, love, and validation, by connecting with other people. Sure, it's not the same. I know you want intimate love, but calling a friend, talking to that close, family member, whoever it is, and let them know about this pattern. Make it overt. That draws in accountability, and it draws in some of the things that your soul is really looking for in that relationship, such as the connection, safety, validation, and reassurance. The third and most important reason that you have to be aware of as to why you keep attracting these avoidant partners is one that's going to sting a little bit. It brings some accountability, so hold on to your seat. Are you ready? You might not actually be finding and attracting avoidant partners. You might be creating them through your own behavior or how you show up in the relationship. Let me explain how this works, because there's actually a lot of hopefulness and compassion in what I'm about to say to you. When you have an anxious attachment style, there are certain ways that you protect yourself from abandonment, not being chosen, not being good enough, because those are your core fears. You protect yourself in certain ways in a relationship, just as the avoidant protects themselves from their own fears and insecurities. Theirs looks like shutting down, avoiding, and withdrawing. An anxiously attached person's is gonna look a little bit different. Somebody who's anxiously attached might be asking for commitment really early in a relationship or putting pressure on the other person to commit quickly. And like I've said before, whether you're avoidant or not, that could create a little bit of distance or resistance to a relationship, especially if they have avoidant tendencies. It's definitely going to flame up that avoidant characteristic, where in reality, if the pressure to commit wasn't there, they might be able to gradually commit in a healthy way, despite having some avoidant tendencies. Another example is the anxiously attached. They're oftentimes needing a great deal of reassurance through their partner's behaviors and their actions. And if their partner isn't soothing their fears of abandonment and giving them that reassurance at the level that the anxiously attached person feels like they want, and mind you, that level sometimes can be even higher than a relationship can sustain, then the anxiously attached person is probably going to come and ask for that closeness, that reassurance, and that commitment in the form of criticism. They're more likely to point out what their partner's doing wrong. So it's like, you never show up on time. You don't even care about me. You don't love me. You always do this. You always do that. And to any partner, but especially an avoidant who's afraid of rejection, who fears not being good enough, they're just going to hear that as a big old threat, and they're going to withdraw, pull back, and avoid, because they can't be present with the criticism. A third example is that if you have an anxious attachment style, you might just be overprotecting yourself by people pleasing and overthinking every interaction, people pleasing, which leads you to show up not as your authentic self. You're no longer you. You're this character that you're playing in the romance movie between you and this person, because you're trying to make them happy. But in so doing, because you're not authentic, there's a lack of real connection between you and the person that you're trying to date. Again, they're connecting with this version of you that's not actually you. And because of that, there's a lack of depth, there's a lack of progress in the relationship, and eventually it just doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't feel connecting, and the relationship starts to fade away. They lose interest, and you're sitting there chalking them up as avoidant, when in reality, you didn't even give them the opportunity to connect with the real, beautiful, amazing person that you are. And the list of examples of how anxiously attached protective behavior can create avoidant type tendencies in other people or in partners can go on forever. But here's the point, and here's the hopeful point. You can change that pattern if you learn how to heal the part of you that doesn't believe that you're good enough, essentially overcome the anxious attachment and become more secure. Then your behavior will change as well. You'll start showing up in more healthy ways. You'll increase commitment on a timeline that makes sense and feels comfortable for most people. You'll be asking for your needs in a gentle way, in a way that doesn't push others away. And all of that is going to elicit the best out of others. Is it to say that you're responsible for other people's emotions or how they respond? No, but you can definitely influence how they respond. How cool would it be if all of the partners that you've dated or could date in the future aren't just avoidant. You don't just have bad luck, that maybe some of them actually are ready to commit to a relationship with a more healthy version of you. But here's the thing. If you're sitting here, you're probably hearing this going, wow, Trevor, that sounds amazing. I want to become that person. I just really don't know how. Maybe you've been reading books on it and going to therapy even, or listening to podcasts, but you don't really feel like you're making progress. I want to help you. I had an anxious attachment style and I was undermining and sabotaging my relationships for a very long time. And it wasn't until I became secure that things began to work. But it took a long time to figure out how to get there. And I don't want you to have to go through the same pain and struggle. I got a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I trained under some of the world's best attachment experts before I even was able to become secure myself. And I want it to happen much faster for you. So I created the program that I wish I would have had. It's called the Secure Self Club. In the Secure Self Club, we guarantee that if you do the work in just 120 days, you will go from anxious to secure. And if you don't, you get your money back. If that sounds like what you need, tap the link in the description below to book a call with a member of my team. On that call, we'll simply talk through your situation and make sure that this is an absolute perfect fit before we invite you to join us into the program. And go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos where we're going to be giving away frameworks and real actionable ways of navigating relationships as an anxiously attached person. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.